It's been a long time coming, hasn't it? Finally, after all of our hard work in the Stone Age, setting ourselves up for success, and all of the infrastructure we put together during the Iron Age, readying ourselves for the final push towards the endgame, it is at last time to claim our spoils. Now, I'm going to be down here for a little bit, so while I'm getting some more diamonds, why don't we recap our previous adventures? Last time, after preparing our base and food supply for the future, we began work on setting up all the necessary infrastructure to complete our diamond grind swiftly. We set up a mineshaft down into the depths where we could gather any ore we wanted. We set up a fully automatic smelter, fueling station, and smithy. We expanded our farms using our new tools, and dug a network of tunnels to connect all of the important locations. Now, with a comfy home, plenty of materials, and better transportation than the entire United States, it is time to finally begin our final preparations to complete this challenge. Welcome to the Diamond Age. This time around, we'll be completing our goals in 3 parts. Rather than laying our goals out straight away, I'll be going through each part one by one, starting with Phase 1, completing the kit. We'll be gathering our materials and crafting up all of the tools and armor that'll be coming with us into the endgame. And we'll be using our new tools to gather resources to enchant everything, and finally building up what'll be our primary source of XP for the rest of this era. So, we've got our plan, now let's get to it. Now, I've been down here for a while, and I've got enough diamonds to make our tools, but my inventory is getting a little bit cramped, so let's head out of these mines for now. Now, last time I went all over the world looking for armor trims, and while I was out, I did find a couple of buried treasures that had diamonds. I wasn't able to grab them then, but I left some beacons for when I was able to. Why don't we go on a little trip to grab those, shall we? Alright, that wasn't too hard. Now I only need a few more, and there was a mine shaft last time that we didn't fully explore. Sounds like a good place to get some diamonds, right? Now, since I had company last time, I wanted to have company again this time, so I headed to Sunny's to recruit them for one last caving trip together. We headed down into the mines again, this time successfully pushing back against the mobs that filled the caverns. We split up our tasks. They would rain arrows down on the mobs while I ran around the huge open space and lit up as much as possible. I made sure to prioritize disabling the cave spider spawners too, that way there would be as few threats as I could. Since my task was lighting up the cave, I also turned off my full bright and... wow, it is really dark down here, huh? We did manage to get it fully lit up before long, but in the meantime, we couldn't see anything. It didn't help that a thunderstorm started while we were down here, which definitely didn't jump scare me. Multiple times. I did end up venturing out of the mineshaft just a bit to gather the last few diamonds I needed, and then we decided to finally head home. Unfortunately, my shield nearly broke while we were down here, so I decided to hang it up for the time being. I'll get a new one later so I don't accidentally break this one, but for now it can rest alongside my iron armor, because now I'm covered in diamonds, baby. So my next goal was getting ready to enchant. However, right before I could get started on that, Sunny called me over to their base. They had found something incredibly interesting. A zombified piglin. Why is that so interesting, you ask? Zombified piglins can spawn in the overworld anywhere there's a nether portal, so what made this one so special? Well, we didn't have a nether portal. I was extremely confused as to how such a creature could even exist, because we hadn't been to the nether yet. And then it hit me. There had been a thunderstorm while we were caving. The only way for a zombified piglin to exist in the overworld without a portal was for a pig to get struck by lightning. Obviously, it'd be easy enough to get that to happen. 3 copper wasn't hard to get, and while it's a bit rarer, a channeling trident also isn't that hard to get. But we didn't have either of those. This pig was struck purely by chance, so Sunny and I decided to keep him. We put him in a boat, and Sunny set up this little pen for him. Together, we decided on the name Blitz, thematically based on the German word for lightning, but also the Nether/Hell association. With Blitz settled in his temporary home, I went back to my main tasks and oh my god, there's a second one. And yes, Sunny did capture this one too. We named it Fizz to complete the duo. So anyways, back to enchanting. I returned home to start gathering all of the items necessary for the enchanting setup. The sugarcane was the easiest, I had already been passively farming it since as early as the Stone Age. And of course there was some at Sunny's. Troy, what are you doing? Cool trick, bud. Anyways. Of the remaining items, the next easiest would be leather, so I headed home and started breeding my cows. Then it was just a matter of...
We now interrupt this broadcast for an important message.
Oh, it's not that important. Sunny just wanted me to teach them how to make a piston door. They're learning redstone. That's all.
Wonderful! Now back to your regularly scheduled program.
A matter of... What the heck was I talking about? Anyways, once I had all the cows bred, I politely asked them for their skin. And the final thing that we needed, since I already had plenty of wood, was the obsidian. Since I was already gathering it, I decided to go ahead and get all of the obsidian that I'd need for this episode. 4 for the enchanting table, 10 for the nether portal, and 8 for an ender chest. And that's gonna take a minute, so you know what it's time for, right? That joke is never gonna get old. Alright, now that's the enchanting setup, but we don't have any method of getting XP to do all the enchanting yet. That's the next thing I want to focus on. So I briefly hopped over to a creative copy of the world and located a good spot to build a basic XP farm. The design I'm using for this is a modified version of the classic XP farm, so I can't really take credit for this design. If you want a tutorial for this farm, there will be one linked in the description. Anyways, now that we've got the farm design ready, I'm gonna go ahead and get it built. And as usual, I think the best way to do that is in the form of a time lapse. So I'll see all of you on the other side. As with the previous project, I did have a bit of help with Sunny for this one. This time it was just with the actual building. I gathered all the materials myself, but they were a massive help on the actual building part, so just like last time, many thanks to them. I let them use the farm first since they needed more XP than I did, and once they were done, I took my turn. I spent about an hour re-rolling enchantments until I was satisfied enough with my armor and tools. They weren't anything too special, just enough to get me through the rest of the challenge. We'll get properly decked out once we move on from the Diamond Age and unlock stuff like villagers and netherite. For now though, we've got all of our armor and tools, a full enchanting setup, and a complete XP farm. So I think we can call Phase 1... complete! And with that, we move on to Phase 2, the final push. For this phase, we'll be taking our first dip into the nether to raid a fortress and gather some blaze rods. Using those blaze rods, we'll craft one final set of items to complete our preparations. Brewing stands for potions, an ender chest for our valuables, and of course the Eyes of Ender to locate the stronghold. Invigorated by our proximity to the end, I hurried over to meet Sunny once more. We decided to build the portal near their base this time, since they were already in their permanent location. I even let them do the honors of lighting the portal, and then together, we stepped through. We took a moment to get our bearings, having spawned in the deadly Crimson Forest. Thankfully, the cramped quarters meant there weren't a ton of spaces for monsters to spawn, but even with diamond gear, I remained wary. The last thing I wanted to do was die because of carelessness. I could see on the map that there was a warped forest nearby, so we headed in that direction first. From there, it opened into a hollow, halting further progress in that direction, so instead we dug our way through the walls. I led the way, tunneling through the netherrack like a mole until I spotted a familiar shape of fortress on the map. The fortress was hauntingly empty as we dropped in, filled with the sounds of crackling lava and the distant cries of ghasts, but it was completely devoid of the life, or rather the undeath, that we were accustomed to finding. I remained in the lead as we wandered the halls, taking the opportunity to grab some soul sand and netherwort while it was peaceful. And it wasn't much longer before we started hearing the familiar sounds of blazes and wither skeletons. Recalling my previous experiences, I remained cautious as we began to fight. My sword was plenty powerful, but not wanting to incur the wrath of an entire army, I switched to my axe whenever there was a piglin around. I even made sure to keep some distance between myself and Sunny in case I ever accidentally hit one, not wanting them to get involved. Despite my caution though, only a few minutes in I heard the sound of angry grunts and prepared for the worst. Only to find that Sunny had been the one to strike them. Still, they assured me they could handle it on their own, and so I did my best to keep the other mobs at bay. And to their credit, they actually did hold their own. The army of piglins wasn't nearly as large as the one I fought last time, but unlike me, they killed every single one in the area and managed to get away relatively unscathed. Not wanting to risk more unnecessary conflict, we decided to push deeper into the fortress and locate a blaze spawner to farm instead. I used my mystical powers of astral projection to scout ahead, finding the spawner in just a few minutes, and we rushed together. Despite a few brushes with other enemies, we made it to the spawner safely and expanded the room a bit. Then we hunkered around the spawner, and we spent a few minutes gathering the blaze rods we needed. Then, once it was time to leave, we had one more obstacle to face on the way out. On my own, I could have fought my way through, but Sunny wasn't quite as adjusted to Java combat as I am. So, against my better judgment, I decided we'd just make a run for it. I took the lead, grabbing the attention of as many wither skeletons as I could, just enough that Sunny wouldn't die on the way. And surprisingly enough, it worked. We made it out of the fortress without much issue. Unfortunately though, when we made it back to our portal, we found that the whole area had been overrun with piglins and hoglins. I decided to be safe and shoot them from above, so that... Ah! And somehow, nothing bad came of that. Anyways, we managed to get rid of the hoglins around the portal. Before heading home though, I had brought a bunch of gold with me for one purpose. I wanted to barter with the piglins. So while Sunny headed home, I spent a few minutes tossing gold to these piglins that willingly jumped into this hole in the ground. Unfortunately, it didn't really yield much of value. I got 2 ender pearls, but I'd still need several more before we could go to the end. Still, that was all of my gold, so for the time being, I decided to head back home and work on the rest of Phase 2. After dumping my inventory, I was finally able to work on the last part of my hobbit hole. I had planned since the very beginning to have a brewing area in the kitchen, so I dug out a space for an infinite water source behind the wall and set up a counter for the brewing stands. In the barrels above, I put the potion ingredients in bottles, and I also set up a little planter of netherwort. It's nothing too fancy, just a makeshift pot that's right here in the kitchen. I decided to make 3 types of potions for the final battle, namely healing, strength, and slow falling. Slow falling was easy enough, only needing phantom membranes, which I already had thanks to Mochi, and strength is just blaze powder. Instant health, meanwhile, would require glistering melons, which meant I needed to get my hands on some more gold. Also, if I wanted to upgrade them to level 2, I'd need glowstone, which meant I needed to go back to the nether. For the sake of efficiency, I decided to get a bunch of gold so I can continue bartering as well. I went on a brief caving trip, gathering just under a stack of gold in about 15 minutes. I used some to craft the potions I needed, and then took a quick trip to the nether for the glowstone and the rest of the bartering. Somehow, the second trip went even worse than the first. I didn't get a single ender pearl this time around. Since I wasn't getting anything from bartering, and because villagers aren't on the table this time around, I decided that, in order to spare myself from an ungodly grind for gold, I'd just get pearls from combat instead. That'd be easy enough, right? And now, with a stack of pearls, plenty of arrows, and a hefty stock of potions, I was ready to get to the end and finish this challenge once and for all. So that's phase 2.
Complete!
For our third and final phase, there is not much left to do. Our objectives in this phase are simple: defeat the Ender Dragon and claim an Elytra. I was tempted to call that good enough, but there's one other thing I wanted to do before we headed out. I wanted to perfect all of my armor. One of the hardest walls for me to climb in this challenge in general was my inability to use villagers, and honestly, it's been incredibly fun to take the long road. That one rule limited me in a lot of ways, especially in the very beginning, since I wasn't allowed to steal food from them either. That meant in order to fully prepare myself, I've had to make farms that I usually wouldn't, to find a different source of XP than I usually would, and it stopped me from a good bit of enchanting as well. After all, why would I make good armor if I can't get mending for it? But the whole point of this challenge was to experience more of what Minecraft has to offer. It'd be pretty lame if I outright ignored the other ways to gear up, wouldn't it? So before we head off to the end, I want to get my armor completely maxed out, and I'm doing it the long way. Now, I'm sure this is common knowledge for a lot of you, but for those that don't know, without villagers, it's actually impossible to get the highest level for most enchantments using just one item. Critical enchantments like Efficiency 5, Sharpness 5, or Power 5 cannot be obtained via Enchanting Table, so we've got two options for acquiring them. First, you can get enchanted books from fishing or from loot chests. This option would take an extremely long time or some insane luck. But the much easier second source is by combining two of the same items with the same level 4 enchantment in an anvil. That option is definitely more feasible. So this means for every tool that I want a level 5 enchantment on, I'd need a second copy of that tool. That means I need way more diamonds than I currently have. So I've got a handful of potatoes left in this stack. I'm gonna head to a cave and I'm gonna keep going until I run out of food. Hopefully, that'll be enough to get me sorted. Wish me luck. Alright, I think we can call that a pretty successful trip, yeah? Now, before heading to enchant everything, I also made sure to smelt all of the iron I'd got, since I'd need at least 2 anvils for all of this as well. Then, with all of my iron and diamonds in hand, I headed over to the mob farm and got to work on enchanting everything. Now, rather than showing the entire process, I'll just go ahead and skip to the end of it, and I'll show everything that I made while I was here. First up is my sword, pickaxe, shovel, axe, and bow. If you've watched basically any of my Minecraft videos before, you'll know where I get the names from, but I'll never turn down an opportunity to explain them again. The pickaxe Apocalypse is named after a weapon from Final Fantasy VII. It multiplies AP growth in its game of origin, and Fortune does the same for ores in Minecraft. My shovel? Now come on, does that really need an explanation? The other 3 are a bit more personal though. To put a long story short, Sunny and I have been working together on our own original story. The names of my weapons come from Sunny's and my self-insert characters. Cardinal Edge and Heartstone being mine, while Persephone is Sunny's. A few other names from that story will be popping up in the future, but until then, that's all for now. The names of my armor, on the other hand, are a bit less special. It's just Emberheart, which matches the rest of my branding. Oh, and while I was grinding my enchantments, this happened. Twice. But in this world, we do have the game mode that makes it so that creepers don't destroy blocks that they explode, so we were able to put everything back together without too much issue. Once I was finally done with all the enchanting, I headed back to my base to make a few last-minute preparations while I waited for Sunny to arrive. Then, together, we set out. We were a bit unlucky with the stronghold spawn, right in the middle of an ocean, but I had brought just enough blocks to funnel out the water. Once we made it down to the actual stronghold itself, it took barely any time at all to locate the portal, though admittedly that was partially because it was pretty obvious which room was the portal on the map. Then Sunny popped down a waypoint for fast travel, we situated our inventories, and I slotted the eyes into the portal. As usual, I was the first through, making sure to baby-proof our spawn location. Once Sunny came through, we split up to pop all of the healing crystals. And somehow, just getting to the crystals took more time than the actual fight did. Like, I brought 4 stacks of arrows because I was expecting this to take a long time, but we got unusually lucky with her perch cycle. So yeah, I barely have anything to say about this fight because it's already over. And congratulations to Sunny for making it through the entire fight without dying. That is the first time that has ever happened, and I'm so proud of them. So, with Jean defeated, that left us one more thing to do. As usual, I baby-proofed the gateway for Sunny, and we made our way through. Now, as much as I'd like to talk about all of the cool things that happened while we were exploring the Outer End Islands, honestly, nothing cool happened at all during this entire 3-hour trip. So here is a quick combat montage of me killing a bunch of shulkers. Now, we ended up going through a few cities before we actually found one with a ship. It wasn't quite as many as the outposts in the last episode, but we were still going for about 3 hours before we found a ship. Once we did find one, though, my excitement overwrote everything else. I hurried over to it, towering up and running below deck. I killed the shulker that was guarding the loot, and then there they were. I reached up, plucking them from the wall, and excitedly slipping them onto my back. After dozens of hours of grinding, from stone, to iron, to diamonds, from our little farm, to the caves, to the nether, and through the end, finally, I have my wings. It's time to fly. Icarus! Taking that first flight with a new Elytra will never get old. Using Icarus, I flew out to another ship to grab some wings for Sunny as well. Then we met up at the nearest gateway, I handed them their wings, and we went back to the main island. Then, before we went home, I made sure to do one final thing. And with that, I think we can finally call not only Phase 3, not only the Diamond Era, but this challenge